The internet is home to scores of adoption success stories.
The baby finds a home, people become parents, everybody wins.
This is the sweetest thing I've ever seen.
But private adoption in the United States is also an extremely lucrative business, with inconsistent regulations and financial incentives that can lead to problems.
You feel gross because you finally figure out how they're buying you or your baby.
When someone stands to make $50,000, $100,000, some people will do a lot of untoward things to make that kind of money, and they do.
Every year, there are about 1 million families looking to adopt a child in the US, and many of those want a baby. Private domestic adoption offers the best chance of finding an infant, but the number of infants placed into new families via private adoption is estimated at less than 18,000.
It's a fundamental problem of supply and demand, and the demand so far outweighs the supply.
That dynamic has helped drive the price of a private adoption into the tens of thousands of dollars.
Money that can go to for-profit agencies, facilitators, consultants, attorneys, and any number of other types of private adoption middlemen. Adoption Network Law Center in California charges more than $25,000 in fees. That doesn't even include legal costs and birth mother support, which can be thousands more. Adoption advertiser, Chosen Parents, is a middleman to middleman of sorts. It charges $18,800 for each new birth mother they find.
We have invited abuse. Anyone that knows or learns the system can exploit those loopholes very easily for financial gain. And there's no oversight. No one is paying attention.
Advocates say that financial support can be used to pressure birth mothers into going through with an adoption.
I had always wanted to be a mom. My ex brought up doing adoption, it was just being punctured. He Googled it right there and called the first place that came up.
Good job, honey.
The first one that came up was Adoption Network Law Center. I called my adoption counselor and I was like, what happens if I don't give my baby up? They made me feel like the adoptive parents were going to come after me for all the money they had spent. But you also can't change your mind because you don't have the money to buy it back. You have to buy your own baby back, almost.
We spoke to 13 former employees of ANLC and heard about some questionable operations.
I got to see the excitement and the beautiful parts and this amazing journey that ends up with a baby at the end. I've also seen the nasty, the dirty, I can't even explain skin crawling part of the adoption world.
The whole thing became about money and not about good adoption practices. Basically making it feel like there was no difference between selling cleaning products or placing a child for adoption. That was the end for me.
I was not willing to tell them that, the wrath of God was going to come down upon them if they didn't place the child. That is horrible. No birth mother should ever feel like that, like they were coerced.
Carrie Sweet was part of a lawsuit against her former employer in 2010. ANLC denies that they ever coerced birth mothers into giving up babies, and ANLC's former owner defends the role the company plays in adoptions.
Private adoption is mostly driven by adopting parents who, for one reason or another, can't have children themselves and really want to go the private route because they want a newborn. They want to have a little more say in who their birth parents are. This isn't for everybody. It really isn't. But people should have the opportunity and the free choice, just as a birth mom should.
But Klupp's story fits a pattern of problems with private adoption that months of reporting have uncovered.
There is almost no federal regulation of the private adoption industry. That means 50 different sets of laws across the states, and they can vary widely.
There are some organizations that I've heard of that will fly girls to specific states because it's easier to have adoptions done there. The laws might be looser there.
While birth mothers moving across state lines may be relatively rare, the patchwork of laws can still play a general role in how birth and adoptive parents connect.
If, for example, a private adoption middleman is looking for a baby for prospective parents in Connecticut, they may find an expectant mother in Connecticut, but then they'd have to follow that state's laws, like capping support for birth parents at $1,500. Or they could find a mother in, say, Utah, where there's no limit on the dollar amount.
The federal government does not track private adoptions,
but many states do record when a child is adopted across state lines.
so Newsy reached out to all 50 states.
Out of the 41 states that sent us data, we flagged 9 that consistently showed more children being adopted out of the state than coming in.
And those states still have an outsized influence, even if you adjust for birth rates and population.
These states account for about a third of the births among the states surveyed, but in 2019, they handled roughly 60% of outgoing adoptions. Part of the explanation could be demographics, but we found that these hotspots also align with what experts often consider adoption-friendly states. 6 of the 9 have no, or relatively short, waiting period after birth before a mother can consent to an adoption. In these 6 hotspots, consent cannot be revoked, and these states all allow non-residents to finalize an adoption in the state. Addressing issues in particular states may have an outsized impact, but reform advocates would like to see stronger and more consistent regulation of the industry across the nation.
The laws in most states do need to be overhauled. Unfortunately, when we do have laws that change for adoption purposes in this country, they are often changed to make adoption easier for adoptive parents and not necessarily to reflect upon the rights of the children, the adoptees who are being adopted, or the birth parents.
Advocates say that money is the root of many of the problems in private adoption.
If you're a legislator and you think, yeah, $50,000 for an adoption, that sounds fine. Seems reasonable. If that's what you think, then you've missed the whole argument about the problem with mixing money with human beings. You've missed the whole argument about how coercive that can be. You've missed the whole argument about how many people that eliminates as possible parents who might make very good parents. You've missed the whole argument about how people, kids who grow up, feel about being commodified. You've missed all of that. This lack of education and understanding is a real problem in trying to get to a better place.
One possible fix is to restrict how much profit, if any, middlemen can make off the process.
Some people will say, well, that's just the free market. But most people who are willing to reflect a bit understand how a civilized society protects children and vulnerable populations. Doesn't let the free market loose on them.